Alrighty, so for my week 9 Learn Together, I added the validation, I added the UUID, and I added an event listener within the output list, which I'll show you in a minute, meaning the render DOM to actually delete. And I'll show you how I implemented that in a little different way than Andrew showed in his. So first, just from the functionality, right? So still these, right? So here, so first is if I didn't enter the week, right, or any of these items, I just have this one, and this is what we saw in the web dev simplified. For me, you would see this logic inside of the, and by the way, this is really what you should see in your app.js is really just whatever setups that you would need to point your document query selectors by the going and getting the save suggestions out of local storage and then an event listener. And then setting up that messages, error messages, I also have an error div that is here, but you can see it in code here. And then I just had a very high level, meaning if they were any of these values were 0, because by default, if I just hit refresh, they are. And that's the other thing is I made the drop down start with the value of 0. You could see that in the HTML, but that's where I referenced those. And then if they were 0, then I would push that message into that array because again, I could be setting up multiple ones and only on the else block, which means it didn't find an error, then it would set up that object, process the suggestion, clear the form, and clear, in this case, the error message. And the reason I'll show you why I did that. So if I did this, right, so I got the error, but then I went back and did another input. And you might think, how could I write validation if all I have is drop downs? I would say change your drop downs to an input and then look at it that way. So here, because now I have a valid set of data, when I hit submit, it clears that. That's what this last right here, that's what this does. Okay. All right, so now that I have this, let me move over to my functions to show you what I did here. Now, I think I talked about this on the attendance. I made a subdirectory in my pub for UUID. I just found it a little easier, but as long as you have it, so you don't have to copy it each week. And I notice almost all of you are using this in your code along, which is good. So in my functions, what I ended up doing, the render of this, which is actually, let me go find it real quick, is actually the decision, the render of the decision div and the suggestion. Just look real quick. I have to remember. You have to remember your own code sometimes, what you're doing. So this is when we're rendering it here. So we have a decision div and a quality check. Okay, so this is rendering the quality check. So let me go back up here and look at the rendering. Here it is of the quality check. Okay, so in here is where I rendered it, and I rendered the suggestion. Again, you have to figure out what you want to save as far as the object itself, right? So for me, I call it my morning task. And then in here, right, I have saved the message, the day, Monday, and then I actually gave it a little different content. I have the ID here, right? So these are the items inside. Now it's a list, so it's actually an array within there, right? And then the message. So those are the items. You could save all the input data if you wanted. And I think later I actually ended up doing that. You'll see that in a future week. So what I decided to do here was when I moved off of here, I gave this checkbox attribute here, which I'm going to remove this decision output. And I then gave it the each ID because the each is passed in from the for each that was called below. Okay. So it was called off this for each loop to do the quality check. So what I did is once I rendered the quality check and I had it before it was attached in appended into the DOM, is I set up the event listener. And this is where when Andrew showed this, he actually wrote the event listener right in that function. But I decided I wanted mine outside. So what I had to do is go look up a way to do this to where you call the function. And this is a different way of invoking this function. It's also what you may hear is called as closure, because this code is running after your page is loaded. So it's actually after the DOM is completed. And so this is actually kind of what they call closed up or contained, self-contained code, meaning this. Okay. So I couldn't necessarily pass the event I needed to get the target or the UUID off of it. But I did find, because of the way it's run here, it actually by its nature passes the E, even though I don't. Not only do I not do this, right? But I don't do this because that actually threw an error. But I like the idea of having uh, just the function that was going to handle the delete sitting outside of this for each. So that's what I figured out. And so this is where I just did a find the index. And then if it was not equal to 1, which means it didn't find it, but if it was not equal to 1, meaning it found it, then I spliced it and I saved it and I re-rendered it. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Boom, and then it's gone. Okay, so that's really the functionality that I added this week in addition to that. Um, so I hope that helps. Talk to you later.